there you are. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to introduce myself. I am Mr. Matuchek of Matuchek and Company, the shop around the corner. Now, if you'll be kind enough to take a look at the window, you'll see that we sell some very nice things. Of course, my shop may be a little far away for some of you. It's in Budapest, Hungary, just around the corner from Balta Street. But I'm sure that the bargains you get here will more than make your trip worthwhile. It's the kind of a shop where you get a $3.50 value for $3.48. And now...
The pod bay doors are open. Thank you very much for joining us once again. I'm your host, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com occasionally. Here with me, as always, with his handy-dandy copy of Anya Karenina, with the Red Carnation, Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com, as well as YouTube channels covering everything from snacks to movies. Jerry Dean Roberts, how you doing, Jerry?
I think people who like to smoke candy and listen to cigarettes will love it.
We're talking about Ernst Lubitsch's The Shop Around the Corner from 1940.
And more importantly, we are exiting ourselves out the other end of Turkey Month and finally into something of quality.
Well,
and it's nice to land on this because I had never seen this before.
Which was
this
really
was
surprising.
Kind of delightful, but it was really delightful, but not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah, when you think Lubitsch, you think it's going to be like a screwball comedy. You think it's going to be like Designed for Living or To Be or Not to Be or something like that. But this was as much a drama as it was a comedy.
Well, it's not just that, but when you think, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch a movie starring Jimmy Stewart from 1940.
That's true.
It's called The Shop Around the Corner. You're thinking it's going to be this bubbly screwball comedy. And it's not that, because my wife and I watched it last night. And while I was sitting there watching it, I was thinking, first of all, there's no music in this movie, except at the beginning and at the opening titles and the closing credits.
And the music box.
Except at the opening credits and the closing credits.
The music box.
And
Oticello.
The music box, yeah. As I was sitting there watching it, I was amazed at how many quiet spots there are in the film. There are long moments when the characters are just contemplating what is happening. They're not talking. This is very much an Ernst Lubitsch production, but it's not really an Ernst Lubitsch production in the general sense, because his films are very lavish. They're very prepared. They're very big. This one is very small and very intimate.
Right. Also, he did not write this one.
He did not write this one. Ben Hecht was uncredited for this.
His touch tended to come not only from the dialogue, but from visuals and everything. But most of it was from how they spoke. Designed for Living, as an example, is all about the dialogue.
We have talked about Designed for Living. That's one of my favorite movies ever. I love the way the dialogue in that movie just flows. And this is the same way, although this is not strictly a comedy. It's at times a melodrama. There's a suicide attempt in this movie. I was surprised at how laid back it is, how each character gets a moment. You know, you have Jimmy Stewart in the movie, and you expect all of the magnets of the film to gravitate toward him.
In some spots they do.
In some spots they do, but not for the whole thing.
No, everybody has their moment, like you said, and it's really interesting Margaret Sullivan and Jimmy Stewart. Margaret Sullivan got billed ahead of Jimmy Stewart. That wouldn't have happened the next year or two, because didn't he won his Oscar for Philadelphia Story in 1940,
Philadelphia Story,
right?
The same year.
In which he actually spoke very, very quickly, which was very unlike Jimmy Stewart.
Oh my God, I was thinking this last night. I have the subtitles on because Margaret Sullivan speaks so fast.
She does.
This is what her dialogue sounds like.
I put all these 40 bags over there on the shelf.
All right.
Is that the way you wanted it?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it. I'd appreciate it if you tell me if there's anything wrong.
When have you become so interested in my idea of what's wrong?
Well, I want to please you, Mr. Kralik. After all, I'm working under you.
And you don't have to keep harping on that.
Oh, no, I didn't mean it that way at all, Mr. Kralik. Regardless of what I think of you personally, I believe that anybody who works with you and doesn't get a great deal out of it is just plain dumb.
She talks like that for long passages.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I needed the subtitles. I was like, oh God, I can't figure out what she's saying.
I think she's more charming in this than she is in just about anything else. And I like Margaret Sullivan.
And you look at her and you wouldn't think. Now, she was infamous in Hollywood for having a very hot temper, but you wouldn't know it from watching her in this film.
No.
What I found interesting was the movie that Ernst Lubitsch said was his favorite of his work. And I think that had to do with the fact that it was so personal. His father was a tailor, and he worked in his father's shop. And he said this was basically a tribute to that.
Which would explain why it was in Hungary. Because when I had said, oh, maybe he wrote it before he came over here. No, he was over here in 1922. He'd been here for 18 years making movies by the time he did this.
Okay, about that. Now, about halfway through the movie, you're sitting there watching it, and Frank Morgan starts talking about Pingo, and you're just like, what the hell is Pingo?
You're looking around, all
and
of the signs
I had to look
are
it up.
Hungarian.
Yeah, it took me a minute because he keeps talking about we've made a lot of Pingo. I was like, what the hell is Pingo? And I thought maybe it was some Depression era thing, maybe it was like script or something like that. And I looked it up, and it was an old style currency in Hungary that went out with the euro. And then later on, Frank Morgan says something about being in Budapest.
He says,
I was like, they're in
alone
Hungary.
for Christmas in Budapest?
And I was like, okay, they're not in America, but everybody in the movie is American. And they all speak with American accents.
Except Felix Bresser,
right?
Pirovich.
Right. But it was kind of shocking because I was like, I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to put. This is a movie that does not reveal itself in 5 minutes. It takes a little time because you don't really going into it know what it's about.
Right.
And all of a sudden, halfway through the movie, well, actually a quarter of the way through the movie, Jimmy Stewart starts talking about getting letters, anonymous letters from a woman.
It's not really long into it. It's kind of, they all have their little thing out front. Then when they all go in, he starts talking to Pirovich about these letters that had been going on for a couple of months.
And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, this is what became You've Got Mail. And In the Good Old Summertime with Judy Garland.
Yes, that's actually a decent picture.
And I was thinking, because in You Got Mail, that's the whole conceit of the movie. That's the deception is the whole conceit of it. Here, it's kind of a subplot.
Right, and because Jimmy Stewart's character, Kralik, finds out it's Novak, I don't know how they said Novak.
Clara.
He finds out, and there's still a solid hour left in the movie. He finds out like 40 minutes in. He finds out about the big twist at the end of the first act. Right. And he knows about it the whole time, and she doesn't.
How they get there is the boss, Mr. Matichek. And I want to tell you something. I went to the IMDb just to see if anybody posted exactly how many times someone says Mr. Matichek in this movie.
Oh, they did?
They did.
How many?
149 times. Right. Somebody says Mr. Matichek in this movie. Mr. Matichek is played by Frank Morgan, who's...
otherwise known as the Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, yes. And he owns this leather goods shop. They all work in it. And the movie, for the most part, takes place within the shop.
Largely.
And it's at Christmas time. And one night, he tells the employees that they've got to stay overnight because he wants the front windows redone. And everybody is trying to find an excuse to get out of it, including Margaret Sullivan, because she's got a date with whoever she's got to
with her pen pal that she's been corresponding with. This is actually when they find out who it is.
Because Jimmy Stewart goes to the restaurant
with Purovich.
And Purovich is looking in the window, and he sees her, and it's like, it's Mrs. Novak.
It's Miss Novak. Novak, I think they call it.
Novak.
They tried to put some sort of a weird accent on it.
Clara.
To make it Hungarian, but yeah, Clara.
And
anyway,
he goes in, and the rest of the movie, their relationship is this deception that I thought was kind of cruel, because especially at the end of the movie, it's a little cruel because he keeps her hanging on the line.
He does. Now, it's worth noting that when he found out who it was, they were exceptionally adversarial.
They were at each other's throats.
Always. He didn't want to hire her, and she kind of conned her way in. And
he's been working at the shop for 9 years, and she came in, and she brought in this crummy little box that plays.
Oh no, he was already he was buying them from a supplier. She just liked it,
and she talked the boss.
She was the only one that liked it. Yeah,
she talked the boss into buying it. And it's a cigarette box, and when you open it, it plays this
Ochichoya.
And Jimmy Stewart can't find the logic in a cigarette box that acts as a music box.
I love it because he's like, say you smoke 20 cigarettes a day. You go in there every time you see hear Ochichoya, it's just gonna drive you mad. And
also, he says it's cheap leather, and it's going to start coming apart.
It's going to break it. It's going to come apart in 2 weeks.
Right. It's going to break.
And he was about to cancel the order because the supplier was on the line with him. Mm-hmm. And that's when he starts talking about how I might not want these anymore. Trying to be really quiet because he doesn't want Kralik to know that he's taking his opinion and just going with it. And then somebody comes in, and Clara, who does not work there yet, has it, and she starts explaining it. And the woman's like, well, no, we don't smoke, or we don't want that. And she's like, well,
she's selling it to this.
About candy.
She's selling it to this heavyset woman.
Right. So she says, how many times, how often do you eat candy? And she goes, well, I don't even know. And she's like, yeah, you just absent-mindedly, and then all of a sudden you're a few pounds heavier. But this is like a candy alarm. It'll keep you conscious of how many times you're going and getting the candy. I'm like, that is a really ingenious sales pitch.
But it should be noted she doesn't sell it to the woman.
No,
because the woman decides she doesn't need it.
But Frank Morgan does think that is impressed by it. Matichek is impressed by it.
Let's talk about Matichek for a second.
They're sniping at each other.
Let's talk about Matichek for a second, because you see him, and when you see having been fed a steady diet of Hollywood films of the era, you see the characters and you kind of just assume that you already know who they are.
Yeah.
And you see Mr. Matichek, and you kind of already assume that he's just kind of a level-headed businessman, but also kind of bumbling, kind of an idiot. And he's not. He's actually got a personal life that is coming apart at the seams. And that comes to us very, very slowly. Because
and it's active too, because it's not only is it his marriage is falling apart, but it's because of someone in his shop.
What's his name? Vache?
Vadas.
And he gets a private investigator. He's trying to get everybody out of the store because his private investigator is coming over.
Right. So what happens? It's the night that they were all gonna do the window.
Right.
Right. And he gets notice that the detective is gonna come, so he shoos everybody out. This is after he gave Kralik the cold shoulder and was acting really nasty to him for like a week or two, and all of a sudden kind of fired him.
Mm-hmm. The most cordial firing I've ever seen in my life. So my wife said when we were watching it, she's
Boy,
like,
that reference letter is a heck of a reference letter, too.
and he had that ready.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the quietest firing.
He thinks, because he thinks Kralik is the one who's taken up with his wife, because it's the only one whom he's had over to his house.
Yeah.
Forgetting that some of them have gone there to deliver things or pick things up. You know, it's later said, you know, he's treated him like a son the son that he never had. So how could you do this to him? And you find out then the detective comes in and he goes, yeah, you were right. It is somebody from your office, some guy named Vadas. And he goes, Vadas?
Yeah.
And his everything
falls into place.
And he breaks, not only because, you know, he found out his wife is cheating on him with someone he pays, and he just fired the best person he had working there that knew the ins and outs and could probably take over whenever necessary.
And he's been there for 9 years.
Right, so and he's developed such a close relationship with him, so you see everything in his head fall into place and then shatter to pieces, because everything he had, everything fit, and once he got that full picture, it was just and he puts a gun to his head, and thankfully Pepe gets in there. William Tracy, I loved that guy.
But that comes after, when the detective leaves. It's about a 5, 6, 7 minute scene of no dialogue, and you're just in the store late at night with Frank Morgan by himself while he's thinking this over.
Yeah.
And he goes...
How many movies from the 1940s give you that?
How many movies nowadays give you that? But you sit there and you think, you know, it's very interesting. It's like... And I was noticing the spaces in this film, particularly because of the absence of music.
Mm-hmm.
You're following a character around this store who's just thinking about what he's just done. Now, I should also mention, this comes on the heels of a comedy scene.
Yeah.
Where he's on the phone with the private detective. And he's trying not to be heard. He's at the front desk. He's at the cashier. He's at the
right.
checkout counter. And he's on the phone with him, and he sort of starts to shrink back into the... He starts to shrink back and eventually ends up going behind the cash register, and you don't see him. And then he shouts, and he stands up again.
Right.
And it's kind of great. That's Lubitsch is good at those little flourishes. I also love the scene. There's another one later where Clara goes to the post office to get a letter, and you're looking at the back.
You see her hand in the box.
Yeah, you're looking at the back of the post office box, and you're seeing the hand in the box, and then you see her face.
All you know, because you knew what box she had. 237.
Yeah.
I wonder, because maybe that was just a reference to this movie from Kubrick.
Might be.
And because he changed it from the novel to 237, it could be just as simple as all that.
Yeah. But
there.
You see her.
I just solved your case. You could stop making documentaries about this now.
No more documentaries about
Please
The Shining.
Stop making documentaries about The Shining. Please.
Well, the thing is, you're looking at it and you see this hand go around the box and there's nothing there. And then you see her face and her eyes are so sad because she has not received a letter. And it's just... She's so expressive, too.
She really is. This might be her best role. She starts to feel ill. Right, she thinks that this guy saw her with Kralik at the cafe the night that they were supposed to meet, and thought that they were together, and so he backed off. And she's like, "Oh no, there's no letter." She's getting all upset, and Kralik knows, Jimmy Stewart knows, that he is the pen pal. And so he wrote this other letter to have and then she got it while he was there. And she like brightened up as she was going to work the next day, and it was but he was such a louse. There was still 40 minutes left.
Yeah.
So of course he couldn't until like the last 3 minutes of the damn movie.
And he keeps her hanging on. Oh my God, it goes on and on and on.
He invents this person, and he says that he came to see him, and he cleared it all up with him, and this and that, and this and that. And he goes on forever. And he just disheartens her all the way down.
You can see her withering.
Just breaks her. All of a sudden, and he even goes into these letters, and she thinks that he's written this poetry, and he quotes along with it. He goes, "Oh, that's Victor Hugo. He stole that." And she's like, "Oh, I thought he was terribly original. Oh my goodness!" And somehow he just says something, and it makes it click.
And there's a
finally
silence.
Says something, and she's like really, really struggling with the fact that it's him.
And you're thinking, okay, she has a cause to either kiss him or hit him.
Yeah, actually, both I think would have been the proper response, because that little tap dance routine.
And because this is a movie, she's got to kiss him.
That little tap dance routine he does at the end there, man.
And I told my wife while we were watching, well, this is kind of cruel. It's just keep her hanging on and on and on, and it's just you keep doing this thing. Now, what I want to talk about is this movie takes place at Christmas time.
Yeah.
And knowing what I do about movies at the time, there's a scene where they're standing outside and it's snowing, but it's that movie snowing where the
guy on, you can almost see the guy on the ladder with the basket shaking it down through the little sifter,
and it's soap flakes and sometimes asbestos. Yeah, but it's so heavy.
But yeah, and then after the suicide attempt,
he goes to the hospital.
Pepe gets
a promotion, and boy, it goes to his head.
Oh boy. He goes and gets Jimmy Stewart. He's like, "Look, I know what happened, but he needs you."
Yeah.
And he goes and he's like, "Look, I know it was all a big misunderstanding. This is what it was, yada, yada, yada. How about you be the manager until I..."
Now, who knows about Vadas? I know
only
Matashek knows about...
Matashek and Kralik knows, because Matashek told Kralik.
Pepe doesn't know.
Pepe does too.
He does too. Okay.
I think he knows, but I'm not totally.
Vadas is kind of a jerk. He's got his nose in the air. And he's kind of just... He's very pretty. You know, he's always...
He's a
snob.
He's a preening little peacock that... well, he's a gigolo, basically.
He's a snob.
What you find out is he's basically a gigolo. Because he's getting paid, getting quite a lot of money from Mrs. Matashek for being her lover. When he comes in with the new clothes, and he comes in with the taxi, and he's flashing all this money, and he's like, "I bet you want to know where I got this money." And they're like, "No."
Because he's dressed nice.
We don't want to know what you did for anything.
We don't want to know what you did for love.
They basically just gave him we know you're dirty, and we don't want any part of it.
Because he's working in this little leather goods shop. I don't imagine for a lot of money, but boy, he is dressed for...
Oh, to the nines.
To the nines.
He's the height of fashion. He's
wearing the sheepskin coat. He's wearing that sheep wool coat. And he's...
As soon as when I saw him in there... The only thing I could think of it would pop into my head was the Kinks. He's a dedicated follower of fashion.
Yeah.
The song.
Yeah.
Which perfectly describes him if you know it.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll be able to play that or not. He's just this preening little ass. He's a kiss up too.
Well, here's the funny thing. The first time you see him after he's revealed to have been with the boss's wife, he is dressed to the nines because he's leaving. And he's got that coat on, he's got a cane, he's got this beautiful hat, and it all makes sense when you see him.
It does. And Stewart runs him out on a rail.
Stewart, this is what I was telling you off mic. It's like there are things in this movie that today the outcome would be different because he hits the man.
Oh,
First
yeah,
of all,
he punches him, shoves him over a table.
First of all, he manhandles him while firing him, which these days you couldn't do that. Second of all, he hits him. You couldn't do that.
Arguably, you couldn't do that then, but...
Who's going to blame him for it? After all he's been doing.
Didn't he say you'll hear from my lawyer anyway? So
yeah.
there's a story afterwards. There's a postscript.
But Vadas never finds out.
That would be the worst movie. Is he doesn't know.
Yeah, he's never told
why he's being fired.
Right. But he's never told that they know what he's been doing.
Which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because he has no idea, and it came out of nowhere. And Kralik was normally at least tolerant of him.
Yeah.
He didn't really want to spend any time near him, but
who would?
He tolerated. Yeah. Well, apparently Mrs. Matashek.
Yeah.
And his other, he's a 1940s style buck. For Midnight
This is my favorite. I want to tell you, this is my favorite kind of movie because when I sat there watching it last night, and this happens whenever I'm watching a movie that I know nothing about, the first few minutes, the first 15, 20 minutes, I'm trying to decide exactly what it is that I'm looking at. Because I'm trying to get an assessment. I'm trying to find my place. And as I'm watching it, this experience does not happen very often. I lost my surroundings. You get so involved. Like I say, it doesn't happen very often, but I got so involved that I forgot my surroundings and my brain was in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's because it's not your typical... This is not Howard Hawks.
No, and it goes in absolutely none of the directions that you would anticipate it to.
No, not even visually.
It's as you said, the dialogue is restrained, the camera work is restrained, especially for Lubitsch. Lubitsch loved to move the camera. I remember there's a few scenes in Design for a Living that are just like really fast-moving cameras, like very obvious camera moves and stuff. There's almost none of that here. This is the most Hollywood I think he ever directed.
But there are those scenes where you can see his touches, like the scene where he ducks behind the cash register, or the scene in the box. There are those little touches, and
you can tell he's definitely in control of it, and it's just interesting that this is the most Hollywood style he directed, and it's not really a Hollywood style.
No, it's
because of the silences and the very candid suicide attempt, and they actually say the word suicide.
And those very deliberate touches where the set design speaks to what's going on, because when Matashek shoos everybody out, and then the detective comes in and then leaves, and he's left alone. I keep going back to this scene where he's left alone for 6-7 minutes by himself, and he's alone in this store, and you can see all of those curtains behind him. He's in this world, and he's in this space, and you can see him within this space trying to process. And there's no one else there. He doesn't have to hide anything. He doesn't have to, because all the curtains are drawn. There's no one looking in, and he's in this private world where he's trying to get his head around what he has just learned, and what he has just done, because he's just fired a loyal employee of 9 years for no reason at all.
Who would have gladly continued there without question.
And probably will.
Probably will. Probably will end up taking over the business at some point.
Yeah, but this was little touches like that, those little moments. The movie shifts very much like life. It shifts
Mm-hmm.
from a very funny moment to a very serious moment, almost on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a serious moment, it'll hang. Because you notice how some directors, they'll have a dramatic moment, but then they'll cut to something else because they don't want to upset the audience too much.
Wanted uh, his audience to feel
Hmm.
as much as he wanted them to think,
Right.
which is why his wit is so odd, because it's so organic. It's intelligent, but it's not like the New Yorker witty, where
It's
you
not
just
Howard
kind of,
Hawks.
right, when you open up the New Yorker, you just kind of prepare yourself to do a mild smile, and that's about as far as you really get with those things. But this his was a very organic and not an in-your-face brainy wit,
Yeah.
and he relied on the audience's emotions to make the wit smarter.
And he
I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does to me.
and he respected his audience's intelligence enough to
Very
build
much.
characters that you will follow no matter what they're doing.
Yeah.
And he can create these minor side characters. You can create these minor side characters that all seem to have a little bit extra, just a
Yeah.
little bit of something.
Like, Pappy is probably my favorite one.
I
Piravish is
love
great.
what he becomes after he gets promoted, because
Yeah.
he gets a little guy named Rudy to be the page boy, and
To take over for him.
yeah, and he just becomes kind of the jerk assistant manager.
Yeah.
Acting like he's
Because-
been there for 10 years.
Yeah, and he's like, well, this used to be my job, so let me tell you everything about it, and I'll be the judge of how you do on this. It's like, no, God, no.
Just settle down. It's first day on the job.
He's like, well, what time is it? Well, it's a little past 8. It's like, yeah, you should be gone by now. Come on, man.
But I enjoyed this. This was unusual. It wasn't what I expected. As I've already said, it wasn't what I expected. Check this out. I found it on HBO Max.
Yeah, it's on Max. It's a really nice holiday movie without having to deal with the holidays in it.
I'm really glad you introduced me to this because, quite honestly, we're recording this in early December. I'm about tired of Elf and
Yeah.
Christmas Vacation, and I'm about done with Home Alone, and I wanted something else. And I won't say Christmas Story because no Christmas is ever without Christmas Story.
You can't ever be tired of A Christmas
No.
Story or It's a Wonderful Life.
Right. I can watch It's a
but
Wonderful
yeah.
Life once a year, but I wanted something different, something new, something else, and I'm glad that I've got this. Because,
Ta-da!
yeah. Next week, we're keeping it in the family. Because next time, we are talking about the 50th anniversary of what is considered the greatest sequel of all time. We're talking about The Godfather Part 2.
It's funny. We did an episode on basically the Godfather trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we have done at least one episode on each of the trilogy.
So this is the end of the
themselves.
quadrilogy.
Well, this will be the first time that we'll be doing part 2 alone.
Because we
I
talked
would
about...
actually,
We did the trilogy, and then we did the first one, and then we did the coda when it came out, and now we're doing part 2.
I'm very much looking forward to it. It hasn't really been that long since I saw Godfather Part 2, but honestly, any excuse I have to watch it, I'm happy to do.
I watched it last week while I was putting up my Christmas decorations, because that's what you do.
Hey, well, look, I was lurking around the Apple TV store one night, and I found the Godfather trilogy in 4K for $10 digital. So I'm like, okay. so I haven't watched them yet. So this will be a nice way to do it.
It was $9.99 for the first two, and the rest was for part 3.
Yeah.
They threw in part 3 for free for a penny.
Well, and it was the coda. It was.
Was
actually.
it? Was it?
Yeah. I don't know if that deal's still going, but
I don't have the trilogy, but I do have the first two. And nobody has that weird trilogy, that weird TV edit.
I do.
Do you?
Yes,
That
I
weird
do.
TV edit they did?
I have never watched it. But I do have. I found it, downloaded it off of digital DVR that I had, that found it somewhere, and I haven't watched it yet, but I think it was on Paramount Plus early on. I don't know if it's still there though. But
They did a TV. If you don't know, they did a TV edit of the first two
they called
films,
it the Godfather Saga.
which they put all of the scenes in order.
Yeah, chronological order from 1
Chronological.
and 2. And
Yeah, it takes the piss out of it. It's not.
it really does. It takes a lot out of it. It's unfortunate.
But that's next time.
Yeah, so very much looking forward to that. We don't really have too many avenues to check us out except for this one. So hit that like, subscribe, notifications, all of that. Let your friends know when we have a new episode coming, and we'll get those social medias up and running again sometime soon, probably at Blue Sky at least.
We hope.
So we'll be doing that. We thank you very much for listening, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
They seek him here, they seek him there. His clothes are loud,